My mom's forgotten recipe helped save our marriage. The recipe she thought was lost. I thought the recipe was gone forever. Then, after nearly 40 years, I found it hiding in a box I hadn't opened since my mother died. I didn't know then that a few faded lines in her handwriting would make me look at my marriage differently. My name is Margaret. For most of my adult life, I believed I understood what kept a family together. Love, patience, sacrifice, and showing up when someone needed you. But somewhere along the way, I forgot something important. Sometimes two people can live under the same roof for years and still slowly become strangers. My husband, Robert, and I had been married for 36 years. We weren't fighting. We weren't sleeping in separate rooms. We hadn't stopped caring about each other. We had simply become quiet. The kind of quiet that settles into a home so slowly that you don't notice it until one day you realize you can't remember the last time you had a real conversation. Our children were grown. Our daughter, Claire, lived in another state. Our son had a family of his own. The house that once seemed too small now felt much larger than we needed. Most evenings, Robert sat in his chair watching television while I cleaned the kitchen. Sometimes we ate together. Sometimes he ate first. Neither of us complained. Neither of us asked for much. We had become very good at avoiding the questions that might have forced us to admit something was wrong. One Saturday morning, I decided to clean the kitchen cabinets. I wasn't looking for anything important. I was simply tired of seeing things we hadn't used in years. I pulled out old dishes, a broken can opener, and spices that had expired so long ago I couldn't remember buying them. And I found my mother's wooden recipe box. I stopped. I hadn't opened it in years. My mother had given it to me before she died. She had always kept recipes the way some people keep photographs. Every card had a story attached to it. I carried the box to the kitchen table and opened it. There were dozens of handwritten cards inside. Some were stained with flour. Some had little notes in the margins. One said, "Your father likes extra gravy." Another said, "Don't forget the cinnamon." I smiled. For a few minutes, I forgot about everything else. Then I noticed something tucked underneath the cards. A folded piece of paper. I pulled it out carefully. At the top were 3 words: Sunday chicken dinner. The ingredients were simple: chicken, potatoes, onions, garlic, butter, a few herbs. Nothing that would have seemed special to anyone else. But beneath the instructions, my mother had written, "Make this when everyone needs to remember why they came home." I read it again. Then again. I could almost hear her voice. My mother had believed that a kitchen could become a place where people found their way back to one another. Not because food solved problems. It didn't. But because sitting at the same table could make people slow down, listen, look at each other, and sometimes say the things they had been avoiding. I looked toward the living room. Robert was sitting in his usual chair. For a moment, I wondered what my mother would have thought if she could see us now. 2 people who had loved each other for 36 years. 2 people who had raised children together. 2 people who still cared deeply for each other. And yet somehow we had stopped sharing the parts of ourselves that mattered most. I carried the recipe into the living room. Robert looked up. "What's that?" "My mother's chicken recipe." He smiled faintly. "I remember that." "You do?" "Of course, your mother used to make that on Sundays." I nodded. I found something written underneath it. He read the sentence. For a few seconds he said nothing. Then he looked at me. Maybe she was right. "About what?" "The people need a reason to come home." I sat beside him. "Do you think we still know how?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence hurt more than I expected. Then he reached for my hand. "I don't know." His voice was quiet. "But maybe we can remember." That afternoon I went to the grocery store. I bought everything the recipe called for. When I came home, I started cooking. The smell of onions and garlic slowly filled the house. Robert came into the kitchen without saying anything. He stood there for a moment watching me. Then he smiled. "Just like your mother used to make it." I smiled back. "Not quite." "What's different?" I looked at him. "She isn't here to tell me if I got it wrong." He laughed softly. It was the first real laugh we'd shared in weeks. And for the first time, I wondered if perhaps the recipe had found me at exactly the right moment. The marriage that had started to fall apart. For years, I told myself that Robert and I were simply getting older. I blamed the quiet on routine, on work, on raising children, on the years that had passed. But the truth was harder to admit. Our marriage had started falling apart long before either of us was willing to say it. There had been a time when Robert couldn't walk past me without touching my shoulder. He used to call me from work just to tell me something that wasn't important. Sometimes he would come home with my favorite dessert for no reason. On Sunday mornings, we would sit together at the kitchen table long after breakfast was finished. We talked about everything. Our children, our dreams, our worries, even the smallest things. Somewhere along the way, those conversations disappeared. At first, I barely noticed. Then one day, I realized I had stopped telling Robert things. Not because I didn't trust him, because I didn't think he was listening anymore. And perhaps he felt the same about me. There was no single argument that destroyed our marriage. No betrayal. No dramatic moment. Just thousands of little moments when one of us could have reached for the other and didn't. The distance grew quietly. Our daughter Claire noticed before we did. She came home one Christmas and watched us sitting across from each other at dinner. Afterwards, she found me in the kitchen. "Mom, are you and Dad okay?" I smiled. "Of course." She didn't smile back. "You don't seem okay." I dried a plate that was already dry. "We're just tired." She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. After she left, I thought about what she had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe we weren't just tired. Maybe we had become comfortable with being unhappy. That realization frightened me, because comfort can be dangerous when it keeps you from changing. A few months later, Robert and I had our first serious argument in years. It started over something completely ordinary. A bill. He thought I had forgotten to pay it. I told him I hadn't. He said I always became defensive. I told him he always assumed the worst. The argument lasted perhaps 10 minutes. Then we stopped. Robert walked into the living room. I went into the kitchen. Neither of us apologized. That night, we slept in the same bed without saying goodnight. I stared at the ceiling for hours. Then I remembered something my mother used to say. You can't solve everything over dinner, but you can at least stop running away from each other. She hadn't said it because food could magically fix a marriage. She said it because sitting together made it harder to keep avoiding one another. I thought about the recipe I had found. Make this when everyone needs to remember why they came home. That evening I walked into the living room. "Robert?" He looked up. "Would you come into the kitchen for a minute?" He followed me. I placed my mother's recipe on the counter. He looked at it, then at me. "Are you making it?" "Yes." "Why?" I took a breath. "Because I think we need to come home." He looked puzzled. "We're already home." I shook my head. "I don't mean the house." For a moment he said nothing. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down. I began preparing the chicken. He stayed. Neither of us knew what to say. But for the first time in a long time, neither of us walked away. The note hidden behind the recipe. The chicken was almost ready when I noticed something underneath the recipe. A second piece of paper. I almost threw it away. It was thin, yellowed, and folded several times. I picked it up carefully. At the top, in my mother's handwriting, were 4 words. For my daughter someday. I sat down. My mother had written it as advice for whatever difficult season of life I might someday face. She couldn't have known exactly what I would be going through. But somehow her words felt timely. I unfolded the paper. The first sentence made my hands tremble. Margaret, if you are reading this, then you may be going through something you don't know how to fix. I read it again. Then I continued. I learned something during my marriage that took me far too long to understand. When 2 people stop talking, they don't always stop loving each other. Sometimes they simply become afraid of what the other person might say. I looked toward the living room. Robert was still there. My mother continued. There will be days when you think your marriage is broken. Before you decide it cannot be repaired, ask yourself one question. Have you truly told each other what is hurting you? I put the letter down. Had Robert and I ever really told each other? Not complained. Not argued. Not discussed bills or children or schedules. Had we actually told each other what was hurting us? The answer was no. We had spent years protecting each other from difficult conversations, and somehow that protection had created the very distance we were afraid of. I picked up the letter again. My mother had written, Your father and I nearly lost each other once, not because either of us stopped loving the other. We were simply too proud to admit we were lonely. I smiled sadly. That sounded like my parents. And suddenly it sounded like Robert and me too. Then I read the final part. Food will not save a marriage. A recipe is only ingredients. What matters is what happens when people sit down together. I stared at those words. That was why she had written the note. Not because the chicken was special, because the table was. I walked into the living room. Robert? He looked up. Can you come into the kitchen? He followed me. I placed the letter on the counter. He read it slowly. When he finished, he looked at me. Your mother was pretty wise. She was. He looked down at the letter. Did she know we'd end up like this? No. I shook my head. She wrote this years before we had this problem. He nodded. Maybe she knew something we didn't. I sat across from him. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? He looked at me. It was the first time I had asked him that question in years. He lowered his eyes. I don't know. My heart sank. Then he said, But I know I've been lonely. The words were simple, but they broke something open inside me. I've been lonely too. He looked up. Why didn't you tell me? I swallowed. I was afraid. Of what? That you wouldn't care. He shook his head. I thought you didn't care. I stared at him. Why? Because you stopped talking to me. I almost laughed through my tears. I stopped talking because I thought you didn't want to hear me. He shook his head again. I thought you were tired of me. And I thought you were tired of me. We sat there quietly. Then Robert reached across the table and took my hand. We've wasted a lot of time. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too. He looked at the recipe. So what do we do now? I smiled. We start talking. He nodded. And we eat dinner. I laughed. Your mother would approve. He smiled. The chicken was ready. I brought it to the table. For the first time in months, Robert and I sat across from each other without turning on the television. And we talked. The meal that finally made them talk. The chicken was getting cold, but neither of us seemed to notice. For the first time in years, Robert and I were actually talking. Not about the children. Not about money. Not about what needed to be fixed around the house. We were talking about us. He looked at me across the table. I thought you were happy. I almost smiled. I thought you were. He shook his head. I didn't know how to tell you I was lonely. Neither did I. He looked down at his plate. When did we become like this? I don't think there was one day. He nodded. Me neither. I told him about all the little things I had been carrying. How I missed the way he used to call me during the day. How I missed sitting together on the porch after dinner. How I sometimes wanted to tell him something but stopped because I assumed he was too tired to listen. Robert listened without interrupting. Then he told me his side. He said he often felt like everything he did was simply expected. He went to work, paid the bills, took care of the house, but he didn't feel needed anymore. I didn't want to complain, he said. So you stayed quiet? Yes. I looked at him. And I stayed quiet because I thought you didn't want me anymore. He looked genuinely surprised. Where did you get that idea? From the silence. He slowly nodded. I thought you were just tired of me. I laughed softly, though there were tears in my eyes. And I thought you were tired of me. We looked at each other. Then Robert reached across the table and took my hand. We wasted a lot of time. Yes. I wish we'd talked sooner. So do I. Neither of us pretended that one dinner had repaired 36 years of marriage. It hadn't. But something important had happened. We had finally stopped guessing what the other person was feeling. We had started asking, and that small question changed more than I ever expected. The next morning, nothing magical happened. Our marriage wasn't suddenly perfect. We still had years of distance to work through. There were awkward conversations, old habits, moments when one of us became quiet again. But now we recognized the silence. Instead of letting it grow, we asked, "What are you feeling?" Over the next few weeks, we started doing little things differently. We had coffee together in the morning. We took walks after dinner. Sometimes we talked for an hour. Sometimes only 10 minutes. But we talked. Robert started sitting with me in the kitchen while I cooked. I started asking about his day instead of assuming he didn't want to talk. Neither of us became the people we were 30 years earlier. We didn't need to. We simply became two people who were willing to notice each other again. One Sunday, we made my mother's chicken recipe again. This time, we didn't need a crisis. We simply wanted to. Robert set the table. I cooked. When we sat down, he smiled. You know what? What? I think this is the first Sunday in years that actually feels like Sunday. I smiled. Maybe my mother's recipe hadn't saved our marriage. Maybe we had. The recipe had simply given us a reason to sit down long enough to find each other again. What her mother had really left behind. A few months later, Claire came to visit. She walked into the kitchen and saw the recipe card beside the stove. Is that Grandma's handwriting? Yes. She picked it up. What does this say? I showed her the note. She read it quietly. Then she smiled. Grandma really believed in food. I laughed. She believed in people sitting down together. Claire looked at me. Maybe that's why she always made us eat dinner at the table. I smiled. I remembered those evenings. My mother standing in the kitchen. My father reading the newspaper. My brothers arguing over the last piece of bread. And my mother telling us to sit down. At the time, it had seemed ordinary. Now I understood. She wasn't just feeding us. She was teaching us how to belong to one another. That evening, Claire sat at our table with Robert and me. We ate the same chicken my mother had made countless times. We talked. We laughed. We remembered. And I realized the recipe had traveled farther than I had ever imagined. My mother had written it decades ago. I had carried it through my marriage. And now my daughter was sitting at the same table listening to the story behind it. That was when I understood what my mother had really left behind. Not the ingredients. Not the handwritten instructions. She had left behind a reminder. Relationships need attention. Love needs conversation. And families need places where people can return without having to pretend. Years later, I still have the original recipe card. The paper has become even more fragile. The ink has faded, but I don't keep it hidden anymore. It's framed on the kitchen wall. Whenever someone asks about it, I tell them the story. I tell them about my mother. I tell them about the marriage Robert and I nearly lost to silence. And I tell them the truth. The meal didn't magically save us. We did. The recipe simply gave us a reason to sit down long enough to find each other again. Sometimes I think about what my mother would say if she could see us now. I imagine her standing in the kitchen watching Robert set the table. She would probably tell him he was putting the forks in the wrong place. Then she would smile, because she would understand. A family doesn't stay close simply because people love each other. It stays close because people keep choosing to return, to listen, to speak, to forgive, to stay. My mother's recipe didn't bring us back to the people we used to be. It brought us back to each other. And perhaps that was the real recipe she left behind. Not something you measure with a spoon. Something you practice every day. Listen, speak, forgive, stay. Because sometimes the people we love don't need another reason to leave. They simply need a reason to come home. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had a simple conversation that brought you closer to someone you loved? And where are you listening from today? Thank you for spending these moments with me. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Echoes of Mother's Voice. Until next time, with love and respect.